Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are very excited for today's webinar. And if you don't know, or this is your first time joining us, my name is Lacey Niemeyer-John, and I am the Director of our Alumni Career and Professional Development here at the University of Arizona. And today's webinar is going to be called Power Up Your Resume with Professional Credentials. And we have special guests from our University of Arizona's Continuing and Professional Education Program, Rebecca Cook, Ariel Gilbert-Knight, and Dr. John Dalala. So thank you for joining us today. All right. Well, again, these webinars are part of the Alumni Career Lab, and they are free for alumni, students, and other members of our Wildcat community. And we look to bring in experts to speak on a variety of different industry and professional development topics. And we are recording today's presentation, so it will be archived on our alumni website for you to access on demand at a future point if you need to. And also, if you have any questions during today's webinar, please go ahead and use the chat feature to type them in, and we'll be addressing those questions through our presentation today. Also, please try to keep your microphone muted just for the sake of sound so everyone can hear everything clearly throughout the presentation. Okay, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to introduce our speakers today and go to our slide here, all of which work for, again, the University of Arizona's Continuing and Professional Education Program, also known as CAPE, where they help alumni, students, community members with a variety of different educational programs that they offer. So our main speaker today will be Ariel Gilbert-Knight, and she is the program manager at CAPE, where she gets to see the career boosting and life-changing impact of professional development programs every day. And prior to joining the University of Arizona, she was the content director at a nonprofit where she delivered educational programs to help nonprofit staffers, volunteers around the world learn new technology skills. She's also worked as a business analyst, a legal secretary, and a freelance writer and a marketing strategist. In all of these roles, she has needed to learn a variety of new skills. And she is an enthusiastic lifelong learner, and she wouldn't have it any other way. What a more perfect role for you, Ariel. Thanks for joining us today. We also have on our call Rebecca Cook, who is currently the director of our Continuing and Professional Education Program here at the University of Arizona. Again, this unit offers non-credit programs designed to meet the needs of individuals and industries looking for relevant skills and competency-based learning opportunities. Rebecca has worked in the continuing education for at least 20 years and understands that career pathways do not always follow straight lines. Yes, I think we could all relate to that. And she is a proud graduate of the University of Arizona in nursing and journalism, and worked as a registered nurse in both hospital and community and public health settings. She is a writer, an editor, a marketing specialist, a children's bookseller, a seasonal park ranger, and EMS dispatcher, and all of that before discovering her true passion in continuing higher education. Wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca. And last but not least, Dr. John Dalala has been an educator at the University of Arizona for 20 years. He is a program manager and program director of our CAPE program. And he oversees the program offering an IT certification training and professional development. So prior to joining the university, John worked in the IT field to help launch a SiliconValley.com, along with working at the Walt Disney Company and touring in the marketing role, as well as the Goo Goo Dolls. That's quite the range, but wonderful experience. And away from campus, he is building a writing railroad and is active in any community affairs. So John, Ariel, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to stop my screen share and turn it over to you for the rest of our presentation.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my slide? Excellent. So thank you, Lacey, for that really nice introduction. And thank you, everybody who is attending. As you just heard, I work at the Office of Continuing and Professional Education, hereafter referred to as CAPE because our full name is a mouthful. At CAPE, I do labor market research to help ensure that our programs are equipping our participants with in-demand skills and that we're meeting the needs of current and future needs of employers and the labor market. I also manage our course catalog and our registration system. So what all that means is that I spend a lot of time thinking about, researching about, writing about, talking about professional credentials. And so I'm super excited to be able to talk to all of you about it and to answer your questions. So before we even get into the agenda for today, why are we even here? Like, why are we talking about professional credentials? Really, it's unlikely that most of us will have the same job throughout our careers. There's research that shows that people have 12+ jobs in a lifetime, and more current research shows that people are likely to have even more jobs than that. And even if somehow you were that unicorn who had the same job throughout their career, the world will change around you, and you're going to need to learn new skills to stay current in your role. And you know, your 5th job might not be anything like your first job out of school. And your 10th job, it might not even exist yet. There are going to be whole new occupations that are created that we know nothing about right now. And all of those will require learning new skills. The world is constantly changing. There are big disruptive events like the pandemic. It was a huge and unexpected shift in how we work and the kinds of jobs and skills that were in demand. But it doesn't have to be that catastrophic. The world is constantly changing. New technologies are created, new businesses open up, and the workforce needs to acquire new skills in order to fill those changing roles. It can also expand your career opportunities. We'll talk about this more, but having a professional credential is kind of a shorthand way to verify that you have certain knowledge and skills. It can help you stand out from other candidates in hiring, and it can increase your likelihood of getting promoted or getting a salary increase. Continuing education of some kind is also required in some occupations. In order to maintain a license or a credential, you may need to have proof that you have continued to keep your knowledge and skills current. Now that I've laid the groundwork, this is what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about what are professional credentials. It can be a little confusing in the non-credit world. Why you would get a professional credential, how you choose the right credentials to meet your specific career goals, excuse me, making the most of the credentials that you have in your job search, and how continuing and professional education can help you achieve your career goals. And as Lacey said, feel free to ask questions. There'll be kind of break points throughout where we can answer questions as they come in. So what are professional credentials? When we talk about professional credentials, we're talking about any kind of continuing professional development activity that's not a degree. It could be a license, it could be a certificate, it could be a certification, could be a digital badge, could be CEUs. You might also hear the term microcredentials, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. But the key thing to know as we're talking about professional credentials is that degree programs are pretty well-defined and structured, and everybody kind of understands the basics about them. An associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, all kind of mean the same thing. That is not the case with non-credit professional credentials. The definitions are not always consistent. People may use terms interchangeably, and there's confusion about it. we're going to try and cut through the chaos a little bit by talking about the differences between these types of credentials to equip you with a vocabulary that will help you as you're looking at the wide, wild world of credentials that are available. You can have some vocabulary and some definitions, you know, in the back of your mind to know what is out there and what might work for you. I want to note that my colleague John Dalala, who is on here, actually wrote an article a couple of years ago about the difference between these kinds of professional credentials. It was focused on certificates versus certifications. And, you know, as it was a few years ago, and as it is now, people are confused about the difference between the two. We in continuing education and, you know, our team in particular, like to help people sort this out and have, you know, a fair amount of knowledge about this topic. So first off, a license. A professional license is really kind of like a driver's license for a particular occupation. It's often required to work in a particular field or to provide certain services. So some examples you're probably familiar with are medical licenses, like doctors and nurses and other medical professionals need to have a license to do their work. Teachers often require a certification or license of some kind. It's really prevalent in like any kind of personal care services, cosmetology, nail technicians, barbering, all are licensed professions. There are real estate licenses, there's insurance licenses, but it's fairly clear and straightforward. You have to have the license in most cases to do a certain job. And just as an aside, continuing education of some kind is often required for you to maintain your license or your credential. So for example, it varies state by state, but teachers may need to get a certain number of hours of professional development or continuing education per year or every couple of years in order to maintain and renew their credential. So like I said, a license is pretty straightforward. Like you need the license to do the job. So we're going to focus most of our time on optional credentials. And that's where it gets much less straightforward. There are multiple options, there are multiple pathways. It can be really confusing to navigate. You know, as I said, you know, some of these terms are used interchangeably. People may define them differently. Some may overlap. It's a wild world out there in non-credit. So here's a quick overview of some of the broad categories of other kinds of professional credentials. So we're going to talk a little bit about certificates, certifications, and digital badges. We're going to jump into each of these in a little more detail. So certificate programs are usually awarded by an educational institution or run by an educational institution. So the University of Arizona offers graduate certificates and undergraduate certificates. And the Office of Continuing and Professional Education offers non-credit certificates. The thing they have in common is that a certificate program is usually more than one class. It's more involved than just showing up at a workshop or even taking a single class. So a graduate certificate, you might take 3 classes or 4, and at the end of it, you have been awarded your graduate certificate. It's similar often in the non-credit world where for example, our advanced paralegal certificate is a 6-course program. You take 6 7-week courses and then you earn your advanced paralegal certificate. That's not to be confused with like a certificate of completion. You can get a certificate, like a little piece of paper you can put up on your fridge or hang up on your wall for just about anything, for a workshop or a webinar, not for this webinar, but for a webinar. A certificate of completion is not quite the same thing as completing a full certificate program. There are also certifications, and certifications are usually awarded by an industry organization or a company. When I say usually, there are exceptions. There are always exceptions, but in general, these credentials are awarded by an industry association or a company, and it usually requires passing a certification exam. So Some examples are human resources certifications that are available through the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM, project management certifications, CAPM and PMP from the Project Management Institute. And there are a boatload of IT certifications. There are a boatload of certifications in many other disciplines. But what they have mostly in common is that you have to pass an exam in order to get the credential. And when you've passed that exam, it verifies that you have certain knowledge, skills, and expertise. Digital badges are a form of microcredential, and I'll talk a little bit about microcredentials, this umbrella term for something that is awarded to recognize any kind of professional development or educational activity. So it could be a badge for attending a workshop. It could be a certificate of completion for going to a 2-day training. The thing they have in common is that they're small, thus the word micro. I don't tend to use that word a lot because outside of training and education, it's not a really super well recognized or well used term. Like, none of you are probably sitting around at dinner parties talking about microcredentials unless you're me or hang out with me. So, but a digital badge is a type of microcredential. Digital badges can be awarded by an educational institution. We award digital badges. Some of the academic programs at the university award digital badges. It can also be awarded by a company or an industry association or another training provider. And digital badges compared to certificates or certifications are relatively new, but not really that new anymore. And they're kind of like what you think of as like a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout badge. There's a little, usually round, not always, sort of graphical representation of the badge. But the really cool thing about it is that it's digital. So you can put it on your digital resume. You can put it in your email signature. You can put it on LinkedIn. And when somebody clicks on it, who is interested in learning more about your achievements, it opens up into this web page that has really, really rich data about what you did to earn that badge. So this is an example from our full stack web development bootcamp. And so you can have a certificate, and people do get a certificate that says they completed this coding bootcamp, but they also get a digital badge that provides all of this additional information about what they did, the number of class hours, the duration of the program, the programming languages they learned, etc. So it's a way of providing additional detail about your professional achievements. And digital badges, certificates, certifications, there's kind of some fuzzy overlap between them. So for example, we have a Spanish-English translation certificate program. It's a 3-course program: business translation, legal translation, and medical translation. And people who complete each course get a digital badge when they complete it. They also get a certificate of completion. And when they've completed all 3 courses, they have completed the certificate program. So you can see these terms and these kinds of credentials kind of bleed into each other, and there aren't kind of hard lines between them, which can make it a little confusing to navigate. There are also lots of other ways to recognize and record professional development. There are continuing education units, or CEUs. All of these, they have differences, and they're used differently, and they're valued differently in different occupations. But what they have in common is that they're kind of a standardized way of recognizing professional development or continuing education activity. And some of them are profession specific, like CMEs, continuing medical education units. And some of them are more generic, like you can offer CEUs in any subject, continuing education units. But it's kind of an agreed on shorthand that is a meaningful way of recording and measuring continuing education activity. So 1 CEU equals 10 hours of participation in an organized educational activity. It's a very boring phrase, but it is meaningful because it's a shortcut in people's minds that, oh, you have 1 CEU, that means you did 10 hours of training. That's cool. We can check that off your list of required 10 hours of training. So any questions? I promise it will get more interesting after the definition parts. Any questions about kind of what's out there before we dive into why you might want to get one of these credentials?
Ariel, one of the questions that came in from registration, a couple of them actually addressed, different specific certifications in, unique fields, right, that are very niche to those fields. Do you maybe want to address, how we serve that within our continuing and professional education programs?
Sure. So that is a really important consideration that we'll talk about a bit more later, is that what is valuable varies. It varies by occupation, it varies by employer, it varies geographically. So, a big part of what you do as a prospective credential seeker is figure out what credential is right for you, for your career goals in a specific, location, employer, etc. So a lot of what we do at continuing and professional education is look at labor market data. We look at, kind of expanding rings. We look at what's in demand in the Tucson area and Pima County. We look at what's in demand in Arizona. We look at what's in demand nationwide. And there are strong similarities between what's in demand kind of for general professional development purposes. Like across the country and in Pima County and in Tucson, employers are interested in people with good communication skills. They're interested in people with leadership skills. They're interested in people with project management skills. But when you get into specific occupations and specific employers, there are profession-specific credentials that are really valued and important and may even be required in that profession. So we do a lot with information technology certifications and general professional development. We focus less on occupation-specific credentials. We do have some, but our focus is we do a lot on sort of broadly relevant professional credentials. Any other questions?
Maybe touch on, there was a question that came in about, how do you utilize all the different, options that you just listed to maybe help you stand out in that application process and help you get the advantage in the job field?
Yes, and I will talk about that at length later on. If we don't have any other questions right now, I can dive into why you might want a credential. So credentials can be good in a variety of points in your professional career. They can be really helpful if you're starting a new career. Either you're just out of school and you're looking for your first, big professional job, or you want to pivot to a different career. As you heard from our bios, we've all done that a lot, and it's not uncommon. People decide they want to switch to an entirely new career field. A credential of some kind can stand in to a certain extent for professional experience. It shows that you already have some of the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do that job, even if you don't have a ton of professional experience. So it can be helpful if you're starting a new career. It can also help you advance in your current career. There are often real, tangible, potential salary benefits associated with getting certain credentials. So for example, Professional engineer, it's a PE license. Those jobs pay $10,000 more on average than non-licensed engineer jobs. Certified project managers, PMPs, they report making about 25% more than non-certified project managers. And jobs that require a human resources certification also pay about 25% more on average, based on labor market data, than jobs that don't. So there's real potential benefits to your salary and career growth by adding credentials to your resume. It can also help you learn new skills, which, as we know, the world is always changing. So earning a credential, whether it's a certificate or a certification or just going to an Excel workshop, can be a way to help you keep current and add new skills to your professional portfolio. Credentials can also help you meet requirements. Some industries and occupations require that their employees have various certifications. So for example, if you're doing any kind of work with the Department of Defense and you're getting anywhere near a computer, you need to have specific information technology certifications or you cannot get that job. Having the credentials is also important in the days of automated application and resume screening. So your resume isn't necessarily going to be read by a human being. Your resume may be dumped into, that sounds bad, but you may upload your resume into a system that will scan through for key things, fill out an application. It will make sure you've checked all the right boxes and you have all the right credentials. And if you don't have those credentials, a real human being may never see your awesome resume or your amazing cover letter or ever find out how perfect a fit you are for that job. So it can help you meet, just basic requirements for a position as well. And employers value credentials because it verifies that you have certain knowledge, skills, and abilities, that you have learned things that are useful and will help you do your job better. A lot of certifications in particular have recertification or continuing education requirements, which also validates that in a changing world, if you have a current credential, that your skills and knowledge are up to date. That's really valuable to employers. It also shows that you have initiative and commitment, that you really want to continuously improve your job performance, and that's valuable to employers as well. Earning a certificate or passing a certification exam, it's not easy, it's an achievement, and that you have achieved that shows something to employers and they value it. So how do you choose the right credential for your career in particular? There's no right answer. There's no perfectly clear career path. I wish there was. It really depends on where you're coming from, your interests, your skills, your experience, and your goals, where you want to go. So for example, I do a ton of labor market research. So I know that there's a huge shortage of cybersecurity people with cybersecurity skills. And I also know that those jobs pay very well. I'm interested in technology, and I'm pretty sure that with the right training, I could learn important cybersecurity skills. However, I have no interest in being a cybersecurity professional, even though it checks a bunch of boxes of some interests, skills that I could learn. Who doesn't want a flourishing, well-compensated career? It's just not for me. And your interests and your goals may be completely different, and that's totally fine. So you have to think about, once you figured out where you want to go and where you are, think about, does the credential help bridge that gap between the two? And we have some general tips for thinking about and evaluating professional credentials that can maybe help you narrow down the very wide field of credentials that are available to you. So the first question is, or a question is it credible? What is the reputation of the person issuing the credential. This Institute for Professional Awesomeness that I made up, one, isn't real, but two, doesn't have the same credibility as, say, a certificate from the University of Arizona or a well-known IT certification. You know, there are tons and tons and tons of credentials out there that you could earn, and some are really well known and respected. Just as an example, like the Project Management Institute PMP certification is the gold standard. It's the well-known, in-demand, desired by employers certification for project managers. There are lots and lots of well-known, respected information technology certifications. And there are others that are less valuable. I'm not going to trash on any particular certifications, but you want to make sure that the credential you're earning is credible and reputable. You also want to make sure that it's in demand. And just as an example, again, I have access to a shiny, fancy labor market tool. I can see what the demand is for various kinds of certifications in various industries and various locations. So this is just as an example. These are the top information technology certifications requested in job postings nationwide over the past year. I know not everybody has access to that. So that doesn't mean you can't do your own research. So you can look at job postings in your field and in your area and see what kind of credentials they're requiring, requesting, or preferring. You can look at various publications, articles, blog posts, magazines, wherever. There are tons and tons and tons of resources out there for, you know, top cybersecurity certifications or 5 credentials that will help your professional career. There are resources out there that draw on much of the same data that my fancy labor market tool looks at, but condenses it down for you to get a sense of what is in demand in your particular field. You can also ask your professional network. You can talk to people about whether they got a credential, whether they've heard of it, whether they think it's valuable, whether they think if they have it, the time, effort, and maybe money they put into getting that credential, was it worth it? If you happen to have a mentor, you can ask them about it. It's just one of many ways that you can research and help understand what is out there and what is desirable in your particular field. And it does really vary. It varies to a certain extent geographically. So just as an example, even between Pima County and Maricopa County, where the 2 biggest cities in Arizona are, the top IT certifications that employers are looking for are different. They're all looking for about the same 5 or 6 certifications, but the number 1 spot is slightly different. In Maricopa County, it's IT Infrastructure Library certification. In Pima County, it's CompTIA Security Plus certification. So you should also get to know what's in your area geographically, because different locations, industries, and employers all value different credentials. You might also want to think about whether a credential stacks, meaning you can earn more credentials as your knowledge and skills and experience increase. It doesn't have to stack. A standalone certificate is still awesome, but this is another thing you might want to consider. So the example I have here is the CompTIA certifications, and CompTIA has this very clearly structured career pathways of certifications that you can add on as you have more knowledge, skills, and experience. So they have everything from very early career to mid-career to very advanced in your career certifications that are recognized and valued in information technology circles. We also have some stackable credentials through continuing and professional education. So for example, in addition to, we do offer exam prep for a bunch of the CompTIA exams, but we have a paralegal certificate program. And once someone's taken that, they can move on to take the advanced paralegal certificate. So again, your credentials don't have to stack, but it's another thing you might want to think about as you're choosing the right one for you. You'll also want to look at what the requirements are for whichever credential you want. Are there education prerequisites? As a simple example, if you're applying for a graduate certificate, you probably need an undergraduate degree. But specific credentials may also just have specific education requirements. So for example, if you want to become a certified project manager through the Project Management Institute, you need 35 hours of formal project management training to apply for this certification. That's just the requirement. There are also work experience requirements. And there's often an application. There's generally an application if you're applying for like a graduate certificate program, but there's often an application for other kinds of professional credentials too. That's why one of the many reasons why employers find them valuable is you've already been kind of pre-vetted. So if you have a PMP certification, you have had formal project management training, you've done X number of hours of verifiable work experience managing projects, and you passed a really hard exam. So to an employer, they already know a lot about you just by those 3 letters PMP. Like I said, there's often an exam, or there may be an exam for credentials. A professional organization membership might be required, or if it's not required, it has some benefits associated with it. So for example, you might be able to save money on your certification exam fees if you're a member of a certain professional organization. And of course, the fees are something to think about. Does it fit your budget? You can also think about whether you need, what kind of education and training do you need? What are there education prerequisites to even begin getting the credential that you want? And even if there aren't education requirements, particularly for certifications, where you have to pass that exam to get the credential, it can be really valuable to have training, because even if it's not required, certification exams are designed to be hard. That's why passing one is meaningful. It's an achievement. So knowing how to do the job, or knowing how to use a particular tool or technology isn't necessarily the same thing as knowing how to pass the exam. Just as a couple of examples, we have a Fundamentals of Engineering, FE, exam prep class. And most people who succeed immediately on taking that exam take it right when they get out of college, because it's this super broad exam that tests them on like everything they ever learned when they were getting their engineering degree. It's much harder for people who have been working as engineers for years and years and years, because they don't necessarily remember every single thing they learned as an undergraduate, because they haven't used that particular part of their engineering degree and knowledge in years. So in our FE class, we do a really comprehensive review of all the subjects that are on the exam, and that's really valuable to, a good proportion of our students have been working as professional engineers for years and years and years, and they're successful at it. They were not successful in taking and passing the FE exam because they just needed a refresher. As another example, I took the continuing and professional education digital marketing certificate program. And to earn the certificate, you also have to earn 3 industry credentials, one of which was a Google Analytics qualification. And I've been using Google Analytics for years and years and years, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And so I went into the certification exam cold and smug, and I failed it twice because I did not have the specific knowledge that was tested on the exam. I knew how to use the tool. I just wasn't ready for the exam. So an exam prep or training of some kind can be really useful. You can get exposure to the type of questions that you'll see on the exam. You can get exam taking strategies. You'll be familiarized with the kind of terminology that you'll need to know. It can be really useful. You also have to think about whether any kind of professional development fits your schedule, your learning style, and your budget. There's no right answer here. It really depends on how you like to learn, how much time you have, and how much you're able to spend. So some people really love self-paced online classes where they can log in at 2 in the morning if that's when they're at their best and do their classwork then, or that's when they have time around their other family and work obligations. And other people really need a strict schedule to keep them on track. Some people really want to be in a classroom environment where they're interacting with the instructor and other students. And some people are less interested in that. There's no right answer. It just depends on how you like to learn. You also have to think about the schedule. How much time per day or week does the class require, and how much time do you have available? And how long will it take to complete the entire program? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a year? Is it more? And then you also probably, for many of us, the budget and the price is a consideration, but it's not just about how much it costs, it's about the value. It's like, what are you getting for what you're spending? You think about how much training are you getting? How many hours? How much instructor support are you getting? Does it include books and materials? Is there an exam fee that you have to pay, or is that included? Are there any other fees associated with it? These are all things that you can think about as you're choosing any kind of professional development activity. So I realize I have been talking a lot and we are getting close on time. So instead of pausing for questions, Lacey, I'm going to talk through the making the most of your credentials, and then we'll open up for questions at the end. That's okay. All right. In the same way that you would tailor your resume and your cover letter to highlight particular things that are relevant to the role you're applying for, you can pick and choose your credentials. You choose those that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So the example here is a marketing specialist job at the University of Arizona. If you have 3 excellent credentials, a digital marketing certificate, a Google Ads certification, and an automotive service excellence certification, which is very in demand, which one would you choose if you were applying for a marketing job? Probably not the automotive services certification for the University of Arizona marketing job. But if you were applying for a marketing job at a car company or a car parts manufacturer, that might actually be really relevant. It just depends on what is relevant to the job. You also want to make sure your credentials are current. So your awesome, Microsoft SQL Server 2000 certification was pretty cool in the early 2000s, but technology has changed a lot since then. So if it's no longer relevant or up to date, you probably don't want to include it on your resume. Though if you're, but if you're working on a credential, like you're midway through your graduate certificate program, by all means include that. Just say in progress and include an expected completion date. There are a bunch of different places you can highlight professional credentials on your resume, and where you put it depends on how important that credential is to the job you're looking for. So if it is required or strongly preferred, don't bury your credentials down at the very bottom. You might want to consider putting it up at the top after your name. So if you're applying for a registered nurse, RN job, maybe your Wilma Wildcat, RN at the top of your resume. You can also include it in your profile or summary section. You can even include a separate credentials section to really draw attention to it, particularly if those credentials are required or expected or highly valued in the job you're looking for. You could also include it in kind of a combined education and credentials section. You have your undergraduate degree, you have your graduate certificate, you have your 2 super cool certifications. They can all be kind of combined together. But it really depends on how important those credentials are to the job you're applying for. You might not want to put them in all those places, but you can pick and choose how and where you highlight those credentials. A couple of really specific tips for your resume and or application is to use the credential name, the full name, at least once, not just the acronym. So if you have the project management professional certification, include that whole phrase and PMP at least once. This does two things. One, you never know exactly what phrase or terms any kind of automated screening software is looking for. And two, it helps any human being who is actually reading your application materials. You don't know exactly what they're scanning for, and they are scanning. They're skimming over stuff. So they may, the phrase PMP may pop for one recruiter, whereas Project Management Institute certification may pop for another. So it just increases the likelihood that the relevant credential will be noticed. List the issuing body, like whoever issued it, whether it's a school or an industry association, list who issued it. The date it was issued, it's particularly important for certifications, but it's relevant for a lot of other kinds of credentials. It just shows how up to date your credential is. And then again, if it's in progress, include when you expect to complete it. And then you can also highlight your credentials on LinkedIn. There are many different places you can put your credentials. One is up in the headline, which is like right under your name in your LinkedIn profile. And this is an example from a real Chief Information Security Officer who lists his professional certifications right there on the headline underneath his name, because in information security, certain credentials are expected and valued. So it's important enough to highlight it and elevate it up to the very top of his LinkedIn profile. You can also talk about it in the About section, which is that text section where you talk about your professional background and how wonderful you are. You can include your credentials there. There's also a special dedicated licenses and certifications section. I don't think it's included in your LinkedIn profile by default, but it's easy to add it. And there you can also just list out any professional licenses and certifications you may have. As with your resume, application materials on LinkedIn, you may want to pick and choose which credentials you list and where you put them, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If you really want a human resources job, then highlight your human resources credentials. You don't necessarily have to list every credential you've ever earned and every job you've ever had. You can pick and choose to really reflect out to the world what it is you want to accomplish. And I think just talk really quickly about continuing with professional education. It'll be like a minute, and then we can open it up for questions. So CAPE, Continuing in Professional Education, does non-credit, short courses, certificates, and certifications for every stage of your career. We have actually had a number of current students come through our programs because they wanted to layer on a credential as they were going out into the workforce. Like, having the degree is awesome, and it will open a lot of doors. Having a degree and a credential can make you stand out from other people who also maybe have that degree. We try and make our programs really flexible. We serve busy working adults, and we know that they have job and family obligations, and they can't always go to class at a certain time. So we have self-paced classes, we have evening and weekend classes, we offer 1 week like super intensive exam prep programs, just flexible options to meet people where they are and when they have time available to pursue their professional development. These are some of our more popular programs. We do coding boot camps that are 3-month or 6-month, part-time or full-time, that equip you with the skills to be a full stack web developer. We have the digital marketing certificate program, the one I took, it was awesome. We have a Spanish English translation program, which is 3 courses. You can finish it in a year. We also have a data analytics boot camp, which is 12 weeks, 24 weeks. I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but it equips you with these really like hardcore technical data analytics skills. We also, as I mentioned before, do a lot of certification exam preparation. We're really robust in the area of information technology certifications. So CompTIA certifications, Cisco certifications, you know, that list of the top IT certifications. I think we offer training for 9 out of 10 of the top ones. And we could probably figure out how to do the 10th one if somebody really needed it. We also do human resources certification and project management certification and training. We can also do custom and group training. So if you or your employer or your team need something and you don't see it in our catalog, just reach out to us. We'll see what we can do. And my colleague, John Dalala, is the one who manages our custom and group training, and he would be delighted to talk to you about how continuing and professional education could meet your needs if one of our current classes just isn't going to do it for you or your team. And just wanted to put in a plug, we do have a lot of programs that offer an alumni discount. So I think Lacey's going to drop the link into the chat. ce.arizona.edu is our website, and /wildcats is where we list all of the programs that may offer an alumni discount. So that was it. Questions?
Great. Ariel, I just dropped those links into the chat, not only to the alumni discount page, but also your upcoming classes like project management, digital marketing, and business analytics. So those are all in the chat for you if you need to go and explore some of those.
Great, thank you. So I know we got some questions when people were registering.
Yeah, so one of the questions that we talked about was, addressing some of the factors on how to choose the right certification. And maybe you could elaborate. We kind of went over those quickly, but maybe you could elaborate on those again. Whether you're a student or even a recent graduate, how can you pair and choose the right program that's going to best suit you for standing out in that application process?
So it really is, it's a research process of looking at job listings, of talking to your professional network, of asking questions, particularly if you're relatively new to a field, your professional network and, resources that are out there and available online are really helpful for helping you understand not just what is out there, but what is valued by employers and what will really make you stand out. So if, for example, I'm trying to think of you graduated, I was a philosophy and anthropology major. I graduated with, back in the day where majors like those equipped you with 0 practical skills. I could write and I could analyze, but I didn't know how to use Excel. I didn't know how to use PowerPoint. I didn't know much that was practical about an office job. So, I wanted to go into the legal field. So it might have been useful for me to have taken, a practical paralegal certificate program. It might have been very useful for me to have some substantial just office technology skills going into that. It's just, there's just no right answer necessarily. It depends on what you learned as an undergraduate and what is valued in that field that you're going into. And you may already have all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that your first, professional job out of college requires, but you may also need to add some skills to bridge the gap. Like, I think one of the questions was about if you want an environmental science job, but you weren't an environmental science major, what credentials can you earn that might make you more likely to be hired into an environmental science role? So if you look at environmental science job postings, you see that they want you to have an undergraduate degree in environmental science or a related field. So you may already check that box if you were another kind of science major. But you may also want to look at what skills and knowledge you didn't get as an undergraduate. I don't know what natural science majors are learning these days, but you may want to layer on like GIS, geographical information systems, mapping tools, data analysis tools and skills. You may want to take a certificate program or a course in environmental law and policy that shows that you are filling those gaps between what you learned as an undergraduate and what you might need in an environmental science career, for example.
Perfect. What a great example. We've had some more questions come in here, and we'll try to address these as quickly as we can. But in terms of your resume, you showed the examples of how people can put their CEUs listed there, and especially during COVID, right, when people were kind of in flex with their work. We saw a lot of people taking continuing education courses and certifications. What's your recommendation for using their time doing professional education to maybe fill in some of the gaps between employment? And what was your recommendation on how they would put that in their resume?
So I think, if you're pursuing a certificate program or some sort of longer term professional development, that is an excellent way to fill in gaps in your resume where maybe you were unemployed during the pandemic, but you weren't just sitting around watching Netflix. You were learning new skills. You were taking courses. You were learning to be a programmer, whatever it was. It can fill resume gaps. I think, as long as it's relevant to what you're applying for, it's just good to show that you are interested in continuous learning and continuous development. So it's just helpful to include, even if it's not just filling gaps in your resume.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just one final question here. What is the benefit of doing professional education through the University of Arizona versus some other platform like GreenFig or other areas, right?
Sure. So there is a certain cachet to that Block A, that University of Arizona name. And we were talking before everybody hopped on about there are wildcats everywhere, and you make connections with other University of Arizona people, and you go out into the professional world and they see that you have whatever credential it may be from the University of Arizona. They're a wildcat too. They're more interested in you. But also that gets back to the credibility question. Like, is it a credible, well-known provider of education? So the University of Arizona is a credible provider of education, and the Institute for Professional Awesomeness, not so much. So there is, I think, real value in earning your credentials through a university, because that certificate with the Block A on it means something to a lot of employers and people that you will meet in your professional career.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ariel, and everyone for joining us today. And we will send out the slides for everyone to be able to see afterwards. And perfect. Here's some information for you to connect with them afterwards. So at this point, we will close out our presentation today. And again, the recording will be available on our website after the fact. And we really appreciate all of the continuing and professional education team, Rebecca, John, Ariel, for joining us today. Thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Lacey, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, and everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.